Influencer marketing is not a fad. It's the new operating system for brand growth. And according to Statista, global influencer marketing spend is projected to reach $32.5 billion in 2025. So that's why I'm excited to sit down with Amanda Brunak. She's built influencer programs for fast-growing consumer brands and has been on the front lines of this shift, shaping how companies work with creators. So today, we'll unpack what influencer marketing really is, why it's so powerful, and where it's headed in the future. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the show. Amanda, welcome to Between the Bears and the Bulls. It is so exciting to have you here. You know, one of the things that I think is really unique to this podcast is that we talk everything from finance, numbers and charts, what's going on in the markets, and then even highlighting a lot of really cool business stories as well. And so that's why we really are excited to have you on today, because influencer marketing, I think, is one of those things that, you know, from a business perspective and even an everyday life perspective, we all see it, right? If you're scrolling TikTok or you're on Instagram or Facebook, you see influencer marketing at work, but you may not know kind of the bigger business strategy behind it. And you've been in this industry for a number of years now, which is why we wanted to have you on. So I want to start with this. I want to ask you, how did you get into influencer marketing?
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me. And to answer your question, a little bit about me so your audience has some context. I'm Southern California born and raised. I went to college at the University of Southern California, and that's where I studied public relations. Had a great variety of internships there. Very fortunate that we're in a huge, entertainment city. I had amazing opportunities where I was able to intern at NBC Universal.
Wow.
Amazon Studios. And then upon graduation, I spent some time at a public relations agency on the Nintendo of America account. And then I made my way over to food and beverage, where I worked at plant-based beverage company Califia Farms, and now Olipop.
I love Califia Farms. I'm starting to see all their seasonal beverages.
Oh, yeah.
In the fridges at the grocery store. And honestly, I think that's also something worth noting. I see a ton of people, a ton of influencers posting their fall beverages, their kind of at-home barista style, make your own pumpkin spice latte at home. And I just see it trending right now. So this is honestly kind of a funny time for that. But that's really cool. I think, hearing that, LA is such a big kind of celebrity and endorsement and kind of big, a lot of shine and glitter around everything. And influencer marketing is definitely kind of grown into that. Influencer marketing, one of the things that I find myself thinking is that the influencers these days are almost kind of like the new celebrities. Do you agree?
100%.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think, brands can have a little bit of both, if anything, too. I don't think they just need to lean into celebrity. I think it's great to have celebrity and influencer. And sometimes it might be even better just to have influencer.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that's really interesting. So when I was getting ready for this podcast, as I always do, I want to try and find some numbers and actual tangible statistics to look at to see where things are headed. I'm sure you've felt this on your day-to-day, especially for being in this industry for a number of years now. You've probably seen it grow a lot when you think about where you first started and just the range and scope and scale of influencer marketing in a business setting. But some of these statistics really stood out to me. According to Consumer Insights, this was polled in 2019 and then polled again in 2015. And there's been over a 50% growth in the number of respondents in the United States that have said that they have purchased something because they saw it in an advertisement from an influencer, which is honestly shocking. I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it because, the way that consumers and people are learning about new products, new things these days is they get ads for them on their social media pages. But to see the context and the numbers is shocking. And to kind of double down on that point, one of the things that is even bigger is that influencer marketing, just as an industry, is projected to reach $32.55 billion in value globally, and that's from Statista in 2025. So that's exactly why we wanted to talk to you and just learn more about what it is kind of from a business standpoint. Where is influencer marketing? Where does it kind of fit in the overall getting the word out there to consumers and to the public about your products or services. So where does influencer marketing live in kind of the big picture?
Yeah, well, first off, Ryan, those stats make total sense to me, and what I'm seeing right now too. And I think the biggest driver for brands adding on influencer marketing to their whole marketing mix really is because a lot of consumers, they're following these influencers and looking up to them as if they're their own friend. And it's really that whole, word of mouth. They feel like they have that personal connection with these influencers who are posting every single day and sharing a behind the scenes look into their life. In fact, I think they're much more, if anything, more transparent and more personable.
Definitely.
More personable than a lot of celebrities. And I think that's why we're starting to see more of an uptick with consumers caring more about what influencers have to say.
Yeah, and that's really smart because when you think about it, word of mouth advertising has always been, I'm not a marketing, I'm a finance guy. So for me, in my marketing classes that I took in college, word of mouth marketing was talked about a lot, being very effective. But in today's world, we're so drawn to our phones, to social media, that there's people out there that you follow that you don't have you don't see them on a daily basis, but they almost feel like your friends because you follow their page. You see all their posts, you know exactly what they're up to. And then when they step out and say, hey, here's this drink or here's this product that I use, it kind of feels like you're getting that recommendation from a friend. And I think that's exactly right. That's why we've seen it grow so much and most likely will probably continue to grow. One of the questions, too, that I was curious to ask you about, because you kind of hit on it there, celebrities versus, influencers, that kind of personal relationship versus, celebrity, them. If you're really into maybe their movies or they're an athlete, you watch all their football games, but you don't have that kind of personal connection with them you may have with somebody that you follow on social media. How big is authenticity in influencer marketing as a strategy? Is that something that brands look for whenever they're creating this content?
100%, Ryan. I think when it comes to me from a brand perspective, there's different factors that the brands will look for when it comes to hiring the right influencer to take part in a specific campaign or even just support a new product launch. And I would say the number one driver for me is authenticity.
Yeah.
Because, consumers, they're not dumb. These people that they're paying attention to every single day, these influencers, they know when they're posting something that just doesn't seem typical to them. And so, for example, if I'm looking at an influencer in a specific category, let's say I work, for an athletic wear brand or a food brand. A great example, too, would be, when I worked at Califia Farms, I always like to see, do they even like almond milk? Do they even like oat milk? It's totally fine. A lot of consumers like both dairy milk, almond milk, and oat milk. That's fine. But I just want to make sure they're organically using this type of product in their content.
Yeah.
Same thing, like I said, if I worked for an athletic wear brand, and we're having this influencer wear these shoes and run in these shoes, do they even like to run?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, just being really focused and paying attention to what these people have posted in the past too.
Yeah, because I think, underlying that is that we don't necessarily like being sold something, right? When somebody comes to you and they're like, hey, buy this, if it doesn't feel authentic or natural for that person, it feels like a sales pitch, right?
Exactly.
But when it's an influencer that you trust, and if you're a brand and say you're in CPG and say, it's Califia and it's almond milk and oat milk and all plant-based products, if you're somebody that creates videos on your page of how to do recipes or something like that with, non-dairy products, and then Califia says, hey, this is a great person to use. Is that kind of how it works? Is there somebody on the team or do the brands pay attention to kind of what's being posted out there? How do you find influencers? I guess that's my question.
Yeah. Ryan, a lot of people realize, or actually don't realize, how much behind the scenes truly goes into influencer marketing and people that work in social media as well. There's a lot of actual data and analytics involved. It's not all just, the pretty post at the end of the day. There's a lot of behind the scenes work. And when it comes to vetting, a lot of brands, including many of the ones that we've worked with, pay annual subscriptions to software tools that give us a glimpse into who's organically posting about us and how well did those videos perform? What is their audience saying? What was the engagement rate on those comments? And so we are utilizing those tools to put that into perspective on who we can work with, that following year and beyond.
Wow. So there's tools out there specifically that will monitor accounts and give data to companies to say, hey, this person, because it seems like, I mean, if you're somebody starting from home, right, and say your goal was never to be an influencer or to monetize your your content, but the way that the brands are finding out about your content is through these tools, right? That's correct?
Yes, and their sweet social media team just always being chronically online, seeing who also is posting about your brand as well.
So that's a funny question. Let me ask you this, because me personally, I like to have some discipline with social media. I like to, when I get home in the afternoons, I don't like to be on social media just because I'd rather just put my phone away. As a social media person or an influencer marketing person, is that a hard kind of line to navigate because you feel like you have to always be attentive to what's being posted out there? How does somebody working in social media or influencer marketing, I mean, is that something that y'all talk about?
Yes, it's definitely hard to not take a break from always scrolling social media. And I've actually experienced times where, people might not think I'm working, but I actually am, because I'm just trying to research, influencers or even just social media trends.
Yeah, that's funny, because if you're in any other business setting and your teams didn't understand what your role is.
You're scrolling Instagram
They're
at
like,
work.
what are you doing? You're just scrolling Instagram at work.
Yes.
And you're like, you should be doing something, but you actually are. You're
Exactly.
doing really important stuff.
Yeah. Also, Ryan, too, I think another good reason why brands are using these tools and also being chronically online is that a lot of influencers' success and people becoming viral, let's say, can happen overnight.
Yeah.
And so the best brands that have the best influencer campaigns are the people that are very quick to hop on a trend or see someone posting about it. Because if they're too late to find out, about someone that went viral, then their competitor can beat them to it. And then they're last in that conversation.
Yeah. That's interesting, too, because that applies to basically every facet of business. You have to constantly keep your thumb and your eyes on what your competitors are doing, because that's in the name. That's who you're competing with. They're your competitors. And so if you're not first to the pond or the first person to jump out on that opportunity, your competitor may do that. And
Exactly.
influencers are like a commodity, right? There's only so many of them to go around. And if the data says, if you're a CPG brand and there's, when I go to the grocery store and shop, I'll use, almond milk and oat milk again as an example. There's a lot of brands that sell different types of almond milk and oat milk. And the one that I'm going to buy is going to be the one that I see used in something that, looks delicious to me. So that's a really interesting point.
And the one that your favorite influencer is using in their breakfast recipe.
Yeah. And what's really cool, too, is that I think we use this term influencer, but it applies to a lot of different things. Because, like, for me, when I think of influencers and I think about, who's, either encouraged or shown me a product to buy, it's not somebody that I look at as, I hate to use the word sales rep for a company, but you could easily, if you're a bad influencer, you could almost kind of be put in that light, right? The people, and we hit on this earlier, the people that I trust their recommendation for are the people that I follow naturally and I believe are authentic and genuine in their content, right? I like what they post. I like their content. A great example of that for me is I'm a big golfer, and I just got a new putter because I couldn't make any putts. And the putter that I bought was the putter that, one of my favorite YouTube golfers switched to and made a whole video about it. And then actually later on, he partnered with that brand. So it was probably the data or the tools that they saw, and they said, hey, this is somebody that we should work with. And to even, connect all these dots here, what was really interesting is that specific company, in golf, the putter market is probably one of the most competitive for the category, right? And there's a lot of legacy players out there. It's really hard, a lot of barriers of entry to get into. But a new company with new technology, they actually just sold the entire company to a private equity firm, and their founder went on a bunch of podcasts after that deal was done and attributed their entire success, not just a little bit, their entire success and growing the business and getting the word out there about this revolutionary new putter technology, all through influencer marketing. And I think that's when the light bulb clicked for me. I was like, okay, this is really cool because it's something that I purchased that the company, their entire marketing plan was just influencer. And so I think that's just an early sign of what we're going to continue to see. And from, a business standpoint, as investors ourselves, we have to keep an eye on how companies are evolving and shifting, and influencer marketing is one of those areas.
Yeah, that's so true, Ryan. And especially with, TikTok really taking off ever since 2020, I'm starting to see even super young brands just take off with their sales and go viral just because their main marketing driver is influencer marketing.
Yeah.
Their main tactic.
It seems like it's a really effective strategy for young companies, right?
Yes, and tapping into especially, Gen Z and millennials, because a lot of us, we're all chronically online. And we're paying more attention. I'll be honest, we're paying more attention to what is being posted on social media compared to watching traditional television and the news. A lot of us get our information on social media and through the influencers that we follow.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think when, for millennials and the younger generations, I think if you go back 20 years before social media, before the iPhone, most people, they'd get home from work and they'd turn on the TV and all the ads that they would see would be television ads, right? And television ads are, I'm sure you probably well know, are expensive, right? You think about Super Bowl commercials, companies are spending millions of dollars for a 30-second Super Bowl ad. And I know that's an extreme example, but the nature of it's still true. One of the stats that I actually found that was really actually very interesting is when we talk about the effectiveness, especially for young companies, right? You got to think they don't have as much dollars behind them to spend on big ads to get their eyeballs. So they got to be really strategic about where they're spending their dollars to grow. And influencer marketing is one of not only the most effective, but on an ROI, return on investment standpoint. For every dollar spent, a statistic that I saw from the Influencer Marketing Hub, this was published in 2024, roughly about $4 to $5 for every dollar spent. So you think about it, and I'm sure I don't know the full scale and scope of how much these brands are paying influencers for their deals, but say it was, a small post, easy number says $100. I'm sure it's a lot bigger than that, but that's $400 return that they'd expect from that one post, which is incredibly effective. So that was one of the other areas that I was really curious to learn and ask you about. Could you talk and kind of give me a sense of if you're a brand, right, in your company and say you got a new product launching, what's kind of the influencer marketing strategy behind that? What does that, scope, contain? Like, what is it from start to finish? How do those deals go through?
Yeah, awesome. Well, there's a lot of behind the scenes, again, that really goes into these campaigns. And a lot of that behind the scenes can happen more than a year in advance. I would say a lot of the major companies, too, do that more than a year in advance, like Procter & Gamble, Johnson & Johnson, General Mills, major household food and beverage brands. They're building these plans. The influencer marketing team, in fact, there's a lot of teams now, more than just one person. I'll backtrack too, because when I studied even public relations back in college, we barely touched upon influencer marketing.
Yeah.
And now, especially at USC, they're having courses on influencer marketing.
Wow.
And so kind of going back to my answer here is that brands are implementing not just one person, and it used to be a lot of companies, just the public relations, strategists, but now they're bringing in full on heads to oversee the influencer marketing tactics and working alongside the public relations team, working alongside the brand marketing team. So it's really nice to see more and more brands realizing the true potential for influencer marketing. And so as these brands get together and once they determine, their goals for the following year and what target audiences they want to really tap into, that's where the creativity begins. And you're really just developing, it's also paying attention to the platforms that are always changing too. Right now, brands that I've worked at, we really lean into Meta, which is Instagram and Facebook. We're leaning into TikTok. I like to do a nice mix of both. We've also leaned into YouTube and YouTube Shorts because we're seeing a lot of short-term video content really take off,
Yeah.
and especially with
That makes a lot of sense. That's
with
all I see these days is
yes.
short form videos.
Yes, because of just, attention span for a lot of individuals.
Yeah.
We're leaning more, the more we indulge in social media, the less of an attention span
Yeah.
we have. And, whatever people have to say about social media versus old school TV, I think if you're working for a brand, whatever you believe or not, it's silly not to follow an influencer marketing tactic in your marketing brand and include that. So, when it comes to building these tactics, again, you're understanding your target audience, what platforms you want to be active on, and then you start to brainstorm and use your data analytics software to see who might be the right fit. And you're also, a big thing for me too is once you have an idea of who you want, it's really important to vet them and make sure, because again, it's really difficult who you are associating with.
Right.
That can either help you or harm you in the future.
Right.
And you might bring someone on, but you're not really, can't be responsible for everything they do outside of that social media post. So it's really important to background check who you're working with and just making sure whatever they have to say or who they are as a person aligns with your brand.
Yeah, that's really critical. One of the things you hit on too that I'm curious about, are there any kind of differences between how brands may use? I mean, I know that maybe the structure of the content, Instagram versus TikTok. TikTok, I think you can post longer videos, and Instagram, it's like 1:30 for a story. But is there a kind of strategic decision saying like, we want these kinds of videos on this platform, we want these kinds of videos on this platform, and then also how do you keep up? Because I mean, it seems like for me, every time I open my phone, every week there's like a new update to the app.
Yep.
It changes, the layout of it changes. So I imagine from a brand perspective that's leaned and invested a lot of capital in this, not only keeping up with how the platforms, the Metas, the TikToks, even the Googles and YouTube, how they kind of shift their dynamics and what content they allow to be published and some of the requirements for that. How do you kind of decipher what should live on each platform?
Yeah, a huge responsibility for, people that work in influencer marketing and social media is to continuously, update their team and their agencies on different updates to these different platforms. We know Instagram likes to make updates sometimes overnight, and you can plan a whole social media campaign and have, specific dimensions, a specific length to the video, and then all of a sudden Instagram decides, we actually want to support more short form content.
Yeah.
We then have to pivot before we're about to publish this campaign.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to always stay on top of those trends. But right now what I'm seeing in general is that consumers are actually really enjoying more, again, short form and short-term content, but also just more raw, less polished content.
Yeah.
Not your typical ad that you would see on TV that looks super high production value. Instead, they want to see, it's okay if their favorite influencer has like, a messy bedroom.
Or their dog in the background.
Yeah, or the dog in the, it feels like more like you're FaceTiming your friend. I feel like that's just way more authentic. And when I speak and what I see, being a consumer too, when it comes to my favorite ads. And so honestly, ads that don't even look like ads are what are performing best. And I see that a lot across originally TikTok, and now we see Instagram starting to adapt to that too, and encouraging the success and constant promotion of those videos.
Yeah. One of the things that I have noticed is I've started to pay more attention to this. Some of the ads that I see now, they'll like on Instagram, it'll say ad, kind of highlighted or hidden in the disclosures. And so that's something is that new?
Well, a lot of brands most brands, if you don't want to get sued, have to comply with the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. And there's a lot of different things that we just have to make sure we're following when it comes to working with a paid influencer. And some brands aren't following this. And the number one thing that we have to go along with is making sure we properly disclose. So once I pay someone, I always have to make sure they say in their caption at least using the hashtag and saying ad or partner. So like hashtag Califia partner, hashtag Olipop partner. They have to have that somewhere in their caption. And a lot of brands are actually not complying with this, and they're just willing to take the hit.
Wow.
And I don't think that's right, to be honest. I feel like if you want to even just be transparent with your consumers, it's really important to just make these disclosures.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll have to keep an eye out for that. I got another question for you too, because you hit on it. You said paid influencers. Could you give me an idea of like how much we're talking about in terms of like for content, right? Is there kind of just like a rough estimate of like what does a Instagram post cost or what does X cost? And is it kind of, I would assume it's also variable on how many followers, or you hit on engagement from the tools. I mean, what are kind of the metrics that you look at to determine how much, you'd want to negotiate with an influencer to pay them for a specific post, but then ultimately too, like how much are companies really spending in influencer marketing?
Yeah, I think, some brands, let's say they're getting started with their whole just marketing strategy and trying to attract consumers. I think some of them might be afraid to just tap into influencer marketing because they may think, oh my gosh, I might need a giant budget because I need to pay some major influencer with millions of followers in order to have an effective campaign. I disagree. You don't have to pay someone that has millions of followers. And, back when influencer marketing, it's always been around, but
Right.
with the emergence of TikTok just 5 years ago, brands were originally looking and paying more attention to follower count. But I say the best influencer campaigns aren't so much about follower count. They're more about their specific audience and how engaged their actual audience is. They could have a smaller audience, but if they're engaged, they're more likely to care about what that person's saying and go run to the store and try that new protein bar or beverage versus someone that has 1 million followers that don't really care what they have to say.
Yeah.
I care more about the overall engagement and impact that influencer has on their own audience. So I think it's great if you want to get into influencer marketing for your brand. It's totally fine to look for people that might have a smaller audience, but they're more passionate, and that might be more effective in the end.
Yeah. And for somebody smaller, I've seen this term thrown around. Is that considered like a micro influencer? Are there different terms of how you kind of break up the category?
Yeah, because it really is the wild, wild west
Yeah.
with influencer marketing. It just feels really new with a lot of different strategies and tactics. I feel like every brand, uses different lingo, but I like to say micro, mid-tier, macro, all these different kinds of names.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I've seen it both ways, right? I've seen, my favorite athletes post, try this, supplement, this electrolyte drink. And then I've also seen, somebody that's local here that's also promoting, it's different company, smaller brand, but, also something that's worth, catches my interest as well.
And back to the conversation around algorithms too, even if you are a micro influencer, if you're posting content that performs well, let's say on Instagram or TikTok, more down to earth, less polished content, and that performs well with the algorithm, that can get pushed out and become viral, let's say, and can get even more video views than someone with 1 million followers. So I always like to look at, on average, when I'm vetting an influencer, how many video views are they getting per video? What is the average? How well does a sponsored post perform versus an organic post where they're not being paid?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And averaging that out too. So I really lean into that versus just looking at follower count. It's really a holistic approach.
So you've seen like the same influencer posts either similar, the same products, one an ad, one not an ad, and you can compare which does. I'm curious, is there one way that it leans?
Well, yeah, obviously the organic post is going to perform way better because
Really?
with the algorithms too, sometimes different platforms purposely but they can know when something's an ad by looking at those. It can signal those hashtag like ad and disclosures.
Right.
So it's sometimes not going to get pushed out compared to something that is organic and not an ad.
I think that's really interesting because I almost think about myself like if I were again, looking at something that I saw on Instagram or on Facebook or wherever it may have been, if I see the disclosure ad, it almost like, even if it is from somebody that you trust and it's a voice and it's somebody you followed for a long time, it feels a lot more natural when you don't see it if it's organic, right? So wow, that's something I had no idea about. That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. One thing also too that I wanted to ask you about, because I've seen like examples where, I'm big into running, so I've seen two of my favorite running influencers. I call them influencers now, just based on what we're talking about today. But two of my favorite running, people that I look up to, at like the same event, right? And it was a big event put on by a major shoe brand, right? And it seemed like there was this big kind of event where they had a ton of influencers that they invited. And I don't think it was necessarily paid, but they were just going around showing their experience. And then that really kind of got me excited to be like, okay, I need to go try this new shoe when it comes out. What is that?
Yeah, so when it comes to, let's say a brand is investing a ton of money in an event, I think a great way where you can measure success on that event is by inviting influencers. Because let's say it is an event where it's consumers, like a music festival or some type of convention. We can't guarantee, we don't know the follower counts of Sally and Joe and all these people that are coming in unless we ask them to, in a form on an online document, hey, submit your follower count. That'd be weird. But we are able to invite influencers that organically love whatever's being promoted at that brand. And that way we're able to guarantee that there's views on social media, and that event is also being seen by people that are not just in attendance at that event. So brands, I think it's great to have influencer support to help supplement that event.
Yeah, definitely.
And that is also what you mentioned, Ryan. They may have not have just paid them. They could have gifted them instead. And so a lot of brands, to be clear, they're not just paying influencers in order for it to be called influencer marketing. You can also gift influencers your product. And we're also seeing a ton of success on that. No matter how big or small that brand is, it's still important that they're gifting their community and their influencer fans. And that's just a way to build a relationship that can even evolve into a paid sponsorship.
Okay, I got a good question for you. Because I've seen that. I've seen these big gifting boxes that, influencers or people that have, relatively large following in a specific space. How does a normal person get one of those gifting boxes? Because all the brands go all out for these gifting boxes that they send out.
You have to intern at one of the brands.
I want one. How do normal people get these boxes? Because they look really cool.
No, that's a really interesting call out too. And I think they're so cool. And I think brands honestly are caring a little too much about their influencer audience sometimes more than their consumer audience. And that can actually alienate some of the consumers. And I'm starting to see this across the board with a lot of different brands. We're starting to see like the influencer box Olympics, where brands can who's designing the most complex box, and really the whole goal behind these boxes is to send to their influencer partners and get free shout outs without having to pay for the box. And the whole goal behind making it super flashy and eye grabbing is so it stands out, so people will want to post that to their Instagram. And so at many of my companies, this is like old school OG influencer marketing and public relations is sending these gift boxes, and it's just getting more and more competitive with the flashier
crazy.
boxes.
I'm seeing, beverage brands
vending
machines, refrigerators. You open it up and it's a full themed, mini fridge of whatever beverage it may be. It's crazy. It's a crazy world and crazy time we're living in, because this truly is something that, I think is definitely a new way of marketing, but something that we're going to continue to see and evolve as, the big platforms, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Metas, Google and YouTube and even TikTok. These are kind of living organisms, as I like to call it, right? They're these platforms, these applications, these social media platforms, they're constantly changing, right? If you go back, and I saw it the other day on a post, just comparing what Instagram looked like, just your feed, like what you see versus what it would have looked like, 5 years ago when you opened up the application. It's completely different. So this is an area where I think, a lot of brands And specifically from the investor's, perspective, it's something worth noting because we have to pay attention to, as investors, how are companies increasing their revenue, increasing their sales, what methods, what costs are associated with that. Big line item in financial budgeting or accounting is cost of goods sold. COGS, as we always abbreviate it to. So how much are companies spending to get those goods sold? And so influencer marketing, it's really efficient when it's done well. Sounds like an authenticity, according to you, the expert, is key. But for us and for investors, it's something that we absolutely have to pay attention to because it's a trend. And even I think it's just the proof's in the pudding. You said a lot of these big companies are building out teams specifically for this area of marketing and public relations. So, Amanda, this was so much fun. This was such a good conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really had a lot of fun, and I feel like next time I'm scrolling social media, I'm just going to be like, oh my God, this is an ad. This is not an ad. This is organic. This is paid. I'm up to date and up to speed, but I'm sure it's going to change a lot. I got to ask you one last thing before I let you go. What do you see coming in influencer marketing down the line? What's the kind of next 5 to 10 years look like if you had to make a guess?
Let's be honest. I see your industry caring a lot about my industry. And I think my industry can help brands when it comes to brand credibility, investor relations. What brands should you be investing in? Because you want to invest in the ones that are controlling the narrative and having the most buzz on social media. So it's something really important to look into as influencer marketing just continues to become a leading driver of the marketing mix at a lot of different companies. And I just see it continuing to grow down the line. And also, recently and even back then for investor relations, people cared a lot about what news articles brands were being covered in. But now it's also just as important to see what types of celebrities and influencers are talking about these products too. So it really just ladders back to the whole brand credibility conversation. Yeah,
it seems like everything these days is a partnership with either an influencer or celebrity. It's a smoothie, it's this, it's that. But
also, influencers can have equity in brands, and
that's really interesting.
And back to what I originally said too, the best campaigns with influencers or celebrities just come from brands being able to be quick and seeing authentic usage occasions from influencers, for example. A recent campaign that I think is really fun is Jake Shane. He has about 5 million collective followers on TikTok and Instagram. He would post with his community. He's a huge popsicle guy. And he would do these crazy popsicle unboxings where it was like a blind box. When you get popsicles, you don't know what flavor you're going to get.
The little white wrapper around it.
Yes. And this guy was like a cherry popsicle fanatic. And so he would tune into TikTok and his followers would go crazy for him, hoping he gets the cherry popsicle. And so he would get so upset when he didn't get the cherry one, or when he did, he would go crazy and his followers would be so happy for him. So Popsicle, the brand Popsicle, because they use these social listening tools, they found out, Jake Shane, this viral TikTok sensation, is an authentic fan of their brand. And so they reached out to him and his team to come out with a collaboration box, the Jake Shane Cherry Popsicle box. And so as a result, consumer sentiment and the press picked up on this just because it was so authentic and a seamless campaign, just by paying attention to what's happening in the conversation on social media.
Yeah. I want to get a popsicle box or a running shoe box or a new golf ball
box.
We'll work on that. Whatever. All the brands all the things I'm interested in, all my hobbies, I got to figure out a way to get some of these influencer boxes. But Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really appreciate you joining us. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate being here.
Yeah.